Now wait a few more seconds so the last answers are coming in here about how you think about this, and it's fascinating. I think if we would have asked this question maybe 5 months ago, I think that the answers would have been very different from what we see today, because a number of us have indeed experience in designing virtual classroom events, and already have been learning quite a bit actually about the events. So let me share you the results from this group. You know, 25% of you, yeah, I strongly agree. 51% agree. Then neutral, 15%, and disagree, 8%, and 1% strongly disagree. So that's kind of, you know, a little bit, so I'm optimistic. It's great that I see that many of you are believing that this can be very exciting actually for professionals, for leaders, for our colleagues around the world. But of course, it's also all about how well are we designing a virtual classroom session. So, and that will get me to the session actually, and I like to start with a short breakout where we basically kind of introduce ourselves very briefly and have a discussion about what are, if you reflect on what are the challenges in converting high quality in-person programs into virtual programs. So let me start the session with you. I will put you all in breakout rooms. Let me see where we are on this. No. I will assign you actually to a number of breakout rooms, if we speak.
Are we in a breakout room now?
I think so.
I believe so.
Okay. Hi.
Hello.
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 Hello,
Hi.
guys.
Hi.
We are not yet in the breakout room.
No, I don't think so, because there are too many people.
We
Probably.
have to accept invitation first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't see any invitation pop up.
Groups.
This is one of the first challenges. How do you get virtual too many people?
Yes.
But we are.
Yeah, there's 74 people, so I don't think this is one.
I only see 6.
I see
Before you can break out.
Yeah, sometimes you have to set the number of groups and then it's split.
Yeah, it looks like it did not what we expected to do, right? So this is something that you do it 50 times, and then guess what? You want to do it, and it's doing what you expect it to do. So let me see. It looks like many of you are back in the session here. Yes. I think a few people are not. But let me get you some real-time feedback from this. I see Aska.
Yes.
If you reflect on the question, what are the biggest challenges in converting a high-quality in-person sessions into a virtual program? What's your experience?
To get a good level of interactivity and having the attention of all the participants at all times, that's a challenge. And you cannot easily see the reaction of each participant as in class program. So that's a challenge as a trainer as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of us, let's use the chat actually. So, what are some of the challenges that you have been experiencing in designing, in converting sessions into a high quality in-person session? So use the chat and just share actually some of your thoughts. I see technology, too many distractions. Again, technology, people, different versions of software. Trainers not experienced, collaboration.
Time zones.
Yes.
Time zones comes up.
Small groups are more effective. Yeah, intensity. Thank you. Psychological. I agree. That's another big thing. It's also in terms of virtual work, psychological. A big theme as well. Body language, interaction. Staying relaxed. Yeah. Thank you for that. Keep going in the chat so we can continue share our experience on this topic. Let me share you some insights on this. First, there is an art and science when it comes to learning design, and we have developed a couple of guiding principles for converting, in-person programs into virtual classroom sessions. And one of the things you might have seen actually in an article, in the article that we published, is that if we think about converting an in-person program into a virtual program, it is not just about converting a 2-day full program, of 9 hours or 8 hours, and turn that into a virtual program. So as a comparison, if you look at this picture here, one of the first prototypes of one of the first cars was more or less a conversion of a horse-drawn vehicle into a new kind of version, where you still see, the horse head in front actually of this vehicle, and they did it actually so they would not scare the horses on the street. And what's interesting is that if you go back in time, in this prototype, they really did not use new insights in automotive design, but also in terms of emerging technologies, and therefore it was never a successful vehicle. If we think about again, conversion of in-person programs into digital programs, the same applies. Now, one of the key guiding principles that Katie and I developed is the whole notion of user design for user experience. And some of you might know that, one of the former Apple VPs, Donald Norman, he coined the term experience design. And if we think about experience design for virtual classrooms, there are a number of things to consider. It's about access, it's about navigation, it's about how can we personalize a session. It's about the interaction with classmates. It's about making sure that there are breaks actually, that you need to think about the group size, what's the ideal group size for a session, but also other things like sending people a workbook to their home. So if they attend a virtual session, they have a workbook they can use. And one of the problem-solving techniques that have been developed by the Stanford Design School is design thinking, and I bet that many of you are familiar with this also in your organization. But what you might not have done is using design thinking for designing and redesigning learning programs. It is actually one of the exercises that we do in our international masterclass learning and development leadership, where we have people in teams do design thinking work and redesign a complete program. And what's fascinating about this methodology is that you have to put yourself in touch with a persona, a potential candidate of a program, and really try to get into the skin of a potential participant. And based on that, you can come up with an amazing insights how you can advance the overall user experience that people have when attending a virtual classroom. The second design principle is, we need to use evidence-based pedagogy and instructional techniques. A couple of years ago, I published this article in TD magazine. It's called Inside the Learning Brain, reflecting on insights from pedagogy, but also from the neurosciences in terms of how people learn. And there are a couple of things to consider when we are designing a virtual classroom session. One is insights from the cognitive load theory. And the theory implies that as learners, as attendees of a program, we can only process and remember so much information. And you have probably also experienced yourself that a number of facilitators and faculty, they like to share a lot, but there's only so much that people can process and can remember. And therefore, less is more actually, and particularly when we think about what are the key learning outcomes of a session. The second theme is about repetition and spacing. We know that information is lost, over time, and it's hard to memorize information. But what we know is that if we repeat a number of times what we share, basically, and we space it out over time, the chance that people will remember it is much, much higher. Then active learning, kind of no surprise to many of you, active learning, learning by doing, is a very powerful way of learning. And that's why also in this session today, we have a number of opportunities to share and learn from each other. The duration of the sessions, even a very well designed program, we know that attention span of people is limited, and particularly leaders, and therefore we need to make sure that there will be activities almost every 5, 6, 7 minutes, so people are more engaged and have no time to go to email or anything else. Learning is a social process, and therefore it's key that we make sure that people learn from and with each other in different sessions. Visual design, it's also important if we think about memorization. How people remember things also has to do with visuals, right? So how to connect text with visuals. So making sure that the slides are not packed with information, that the font size makes all sense, easy to read. So visual is important. And last but not least, there's also using slides that will have an emotional touch, and hopefully when you watch the video at the beginning, it's also a video with emotions. And we know from even Plato, who mentioned all learning has an emotional touch. And last but not least here, and particularly with virtual learning, it's important that people continue to move because we know that movement will increase blood and oxygen levels, and that has a huge impact on cognitive development. So therefore, I often ask people in a virtual session just to stand up or do an exercise so that we are basically moving a little bit, because attending a session for a couple of hours, what I don't recommend, is not necessarily the best from a learning perspective. Now, I want to ask you again to reflect on what I just shared, actually, and to use the annotation tools and just for yourself, put a dot actually, what you believe is the most important thing here. So repetition and spacing, duration of the session, active learning, yeah. Active learning seems to be, pretty high. Although it also, yeah. Well, thank you. So it's, if you reflect on this question, it looks like pretty well balanced if I look at the number of dots. And this is also, again, an exercise that, that you can use in your virtual programs to ask people, instead of a poll question, to do something, to use the annotation tools. Okay, thank you for sharing this. Now, let me make sure that we will clear all of this here. The second theme is, of the third guiding principle, is enabling pedagogy through technology. All of you are using different kind of platforms, Adobe, WebEx, Zoom, Centra, and other platforms. And as you know, like each platform has unique functionality that will enable pedagogy to advance the learning experience that people have in sessions, and to basically support. And what we can do is we can use different functionality of platforms to support different learning outcomes. So as an example, one of the goals is to share knowledge. And you see actually here on the left side that there are a number of features, technology features, platform features that will help you to share knowledge or co-create knowledge. Then the middle column here is a learning objective or a learning outcome, is about problem solving. How can we solve problems together? How can we collaborate on different topics? And again, there are different, different functionality that will support that. And the last one is about feedback. How do we make sure that we give people feedback, people in teams or individually, and what kind of tools can be used to support feedback? That just give you a sense. If you design a program and think about all the features you have in your platform, make sure that you use them to support specific learning outcomes. Okay. At IE, we also have a platform. We are using a lot of different platforms, and one platform that we are using, in addition to Zoom, is a platform that we have developed ourselves. It's called the WOW Classroom. And the screen that you see in front of you is the screen of a facilitator, of a faculty member. And I wanted to show you this screen actually, because it goes back to kind of, the user experience as a faculty member. And, and if you compare this with Zoom, what you see is that basically all the functions as a faculty member are on one page. So you don't have to go deep into sub menus. There's also, the raising your hand button on the upper right, actually, where you see immediately who has raised his or her hand, and also you can lower the hand if you go down. Actually, on the screen here, you can see where you also there's a button where you can lower your hand, all the hands actually. There's also different ways to share actually different information. Your screen, videos, which you can already upload before any session, different PDFs, other media and slides. And also, what I really like about the platform is that, you know, you see, as an example, you see here the people who are participating, and there are basically, in this screen, you see only one color, green, but it shows actually to which extent people are participating. So you can see a green, an orange, or a red. And if someone is a red, it means that he or she has not necessarily answered any questions, has not participated in the polls, has not participated in the chat. And as a facilitator, you can say, hey, Sheila, as an example, you know, what do you think about this question? And therefore make it even more interactive. So the last one I'd like to share you, almost the last one, is guiding principle is using data for learning. And if we think about the platforms that we are using, depending on the platform, data can be used to, as an example, to improve real-time response and real-time engagement. It can also help us to advance our design of a session, so we can learn actually from participants and improve design. And also, as a consequence, in terms of improving design, making sure that from a learning perspective, it becomes a more effective learning experience with impact. And there are a lot of different data that can be collected. You know, one is, of course, you know, to see if people have turned on their camera, if they are on the screen. And in terms of today, typically, when I have a Zoom session, I have two monitors. I have one next to me, a very big screen, where I have all the faces of all the participants, and also I have the chat room open. And then I have another screen in front of me. That's basically the screen that I use for my slides. And by doing that, I can see kind of, you know, who's online, and I can ask people questions and look in their faces actually. So, so that's key. But also you look at how well people do in the chat room, responses, if people complete polls. I can look at names of people who answer questions, the facilitators who are leading different breakout sessions, or students who are involved in that. And last but not least, we also have an exciting feature, and I think this is also what will happen over the next few years more and more. We are piloting also functionality where we basically analyze video feeds and basically people's emotions. So if people are excited, are they surprised? Do they look bored actually on the screen? Are they distracted, right? So to analyze people's faces, that will give a facilitator insight in the level of engagement and how motivated people are to participate in a session. So that's just an example of different features that you have when you think about collecting data. So in terms of the last one I'd like to show you, and then we go more interactive again, it goes back to faculty. As we think about delivering delivering virtual classroom sessions, there's no doubt that this is a whole, this requires a specific skills, but also an online teaching style. And there are a number of things that we need to keep in mind. Well, first, of course, as a facilitator, as a faculty member, you need to understand the content. Secondly, it's key to understand all the features and functions of the technology that is in place. Third, the program needs to be designed. So, and in order to design a program well, you need to have insights, as I mentioned before, on pedagogy and on, on instructional design. So how design a program in a way that it will have a huge impact in achieving learning outcomes. Then, of course, delivery is king. And therefore, if you think about didactics, that's basically the discipline that is concerned with the science of teaching and instruction. So how do you teach actually? If you have designed the program, what do you need to keep in mind when you're teaching? And what's part of that, in a way, is also how to make things interactive, how to give feedback in a very constructive way, but also how to use your voice, you know, because it has huge impact. Using your voice has huge impact on engaging people, keeping people's attention. So voice is very key. And as you can imagine, you know, it's key for faculty, for facilitators to deliver programs that a lot of training will be delivered to help them actually to build their competence in the different segments what I shared you on this slide. So I want to ask you to go back to the chat room, and you know, I've been sharing with you, you know, 5 guiding principles, and reflect on, you know, which guiding principle do you believe is the most impactful, most important one if you want to deliver virtual classroom excellence? You may say the A or the B. So what do you think? What is the most important actually? Yeah, B and C, A. I see a lot of A's actually. All, yeah. Demo, thank you for that. Number C, A and E. Yeah, thank you. So it's important to reflect on these 5 guiding principles. And if you think about developing your faculty, developing your facilitators in your organization, so where to start, right? And how to develop programs that will help them to develop their competence in this space. So thank you for sharing your feedback.
And
Here.
Nick, can I just jump in real quick on that?
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to see all the responses there, and I agree. It's a balance of all of these to make it successful. But I was really thrilled to see so many people picking up that it's the design, but also the faculty. You know, we've had instructors that are just phenomenal in the in-person classroom space. We bring them into a virtual space, and they really struggle. So it's definitely a skill, and it really does make or break the session. So just wanted to throw that in as another point.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I will give the floor to you.
Awesome. All right, guys. So thanks so much. Those guiding principles are a great foundation. There's a lot to think about when you're working in a virtual space. And what Nick and I thought we'd do is I'll share a case study example with you just to kind of get your juices flowing. And then we're going to put you back into breakouts and have you do a little bit of practice. So let's go to the next slide, Nick. And the case that I'm going to talk about is a new team leader program. So we have a new team leader. We had a new team leader program that was basically a traditional 3-day classroom event with a little bit of pre-reading, a little bit of post-work, but it was designed very well. We did the needs analysis. We came up with the right learning objectives. The content is very interactive. Again, fantastic experience. Our participants loved it. Some of the feedback we got, was the transfer. And I know as learning professionals, we all struggle with this, right? How do people transfer what they actually learn in the classroom back to the job? Are they really prepared? Are they really able to use the things? Is the timing right? How much did they really retain? So transfer is a big challenge. And then there's also, in our world anyway, an issue with scale. Like, how do we get as many people through the course as possible? And we can't take people out of their roles for 2 weeks or even a full week of in-person learning. So how do we do this? And these were some of the challenges that we faced. And so with that, we took a step back with all of that. And then, and then on top of that, add COVID, right? Add a situation where you cannot bring people together in person. So there's all of these factors that you're trying to balance. So we took a step back. We said, how do we tackle all of this? And the first thing we did is, we started looking at data. We looked at feedback from our year-end review process. So our talent colleagues would synthesize some of the biggest pain points for these kind of new team leaders, which is really their first introduction in a leadership role. So they're fairly junior, they're moving into leadership, and they may have a team of 4 or 5 people that they're responsible for kind of their work, their year-end reviews and things like that. So we look at their year-end feedback. We did a lot of focus group interviews with the managers, the team leaders, managers, with new team leaders themselves, with our talent colleagues. We looked at a ton of data, and we came up with the same conclusions that we wanted to break it down by leading self, leading others, and leading work. Those 3 categories still worked, and there was a number of outcomes within each one of those. And then we started to restructure the program, and thinking about the things that Nick talked about in terms of spacing, giving people time to actually practice and reflect and get feedback, and building capabilities over time. And that led us, Nick, if you want to go to the next page, to a new architecture. And this is similar that's in the article. It's just shown in a little bit different format for this presentation. So you have this also in the article. But basically, we said, okay, how do we do this in a different way that's going to help us with the transfer problem, help us with the scale problem, and then also help us with getting more people through the program. So we decided to experiment, and this is a lot about test and learn, guys. This is an iterative process over and over again to develop this. And so we did it by chunk. So we said, okay, leading self is still viable from our reevaluation of the program, and what are the key things that we need to cover within the leading self module. And we're gonna do that in a month-long experience that's going to include some self-paced learning. So there's some things that they need to do on their own. We're going to have them in small cohort groups of 5, and that group of 5 is going to have a coach that's going to guide them through the process. So in their cohorts, they're going to practice some things and work on some things. And then we're going to bring the whole class together in a plenary type environment, and we're going to do some work with them in a plenary type environment. So each month is kind of structured with those types of interactions. And so, they go through that program, and then at the end, we have a pulling it all together exercise where they have to create a TED Talk of their experience in the program and kind of who they want to be as a leader. So they create this TED Talk, and they present it in their cohort groups at the end of the session. So that was kind of the high level architecture. We also found out that it is really important how you set this up. So that participant orientation, the communications around this, and the participant orientation is really, really important. So kind of what are the expectations of you in your new role? What are the expectations of you in this program? And how are we going to help you be successful? And the amount of time and commitment that you need to have, and how do you talk to your manager about this program? How do you work with your manager so your manager understands what you're learning, and they can also support you during the process? And we feed them things throughout the whole experience that they should be discussing with their manager. We talk about learning in a blended environment, what that means, what the time commitment is, and how to handle that if they have challenges with that, talking to the program leaders and their manager about that. And then, learning how to learn, we do a little bit of that as well. We also, in the participant orientation, we do team building, virtual team building. So they're starting to create relationships at that beginning point. So that's really, really critical. So those are kind of the key as thinking about the architecture of the things that we thought about. And again, this is iterative as you're working through this session or this program, this design. Nick, go to the next page. So once you have the architecture, then you have to design the pieces, and you can use a document, something like this. We have, some of them are even have more columns, if you will, around kind of what's the other things you need to consider, the prerequisites for the course, how does this connect? But we wanted to give a simple kind of design document, but this can include more meat, specific timing and things like that. This was for the orientation, just to give you an example. And again, this is in the article, so you have it. But our big outcomes were everybody knows what it takes to successfully complete the program. They're motivated and inspired, excited to do it, and very, very clear on next steps. And you can see the types of content. The interactions, we found kind of an online icebreaker activity that we use that's exciting and interesting, that gets them going. We have a visual map of the program that they work through together, and we do whiteboard activities on critical success factors. So it's highly interactive. And then, lots of materials that are needed to support that, and then break out kind of what's the technology that's required. So that's how you kind of dig into a session, if you will. And you have to do that for the entire experience. The designers will think through that. And that's where all of those guiding principles that Nick talked about earlier come into play when you're doing this design work. All right, so I've been talking for quite a bit. We really want to give you a chance to play with the methodology and play with this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you back in small groups, and for 20 minutes. We're going to give you 20 minutes to do this. What I'd love for you to do is pull out your camera and your phone, or take a screenshot, but capture this page on your phone or screenshot, so you have the questions and things with you when you go into your breakout. When you get into your breakout, just take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, and have someone that helps you monitor the time. And then kind of using all of the things that we've been talking about in the article, kind of think about a difficult conversations module. You had to develop a difficult conversations module for virtual delivery. How would you do that? So what are the objectives? What content might you include? What interactions could you design into it? What technology or materials? Just high level, kind of start to play with these concepts. And then we'll come back together and we'll get some feedback from you through chat. We may call on a few of you to share what you talked about, and we'll go from there. Don't worry about being perfect, guys. This is a short opportunity for you to play with some of this material. Okay?
Hi. I was alone in my room, so I came back.
Me also. I was alone in my group.
Okay, I guess.
I had the same.
Okay, good. So we'll be the group.
We're the lonely group.
Yes, we're the lonely group. All right. Let's see the instructions. I'm Haita, by the way, and I just love developing awesome learning experiences for schools, businesses, and governments. And I'm based here in Connecticut, in the U.S.
Shall I just introduce myself? I'm Jessica Peters, and I'm the Director of Customized and Industry-Focused Solutions of Nijrode, the Business University in the Netherlands.
Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. And who's next?
Hello, my name is Aino Tenhela. I'm faculty at IE Business School.
What country are you in?
So I'm in Spain.
Oh, in Spain, okay.
Yeah, I'm originally from Finland.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Stein. I'm
Yeah.
based in Singapore. I used to work for Singapore Management University since 3 months, independent contractor to leadership development programs. Maybe, Jessica, you just want to call out names so that we can get down the list faster.
Yeah, why don't you call the next one? If everybody has introduced themselves and calls the name of the next one, maybe that's a good idea.
Okay, I was in a group all by myself, so I think I got put into this group last, so I don't know who's introduced himself, but I see a name here who I haven't heard yet, Lisette Motmans.
Yeah.
If not Lisette, then Dr. Kaitza.
Oh, yes, I was one of the first ones. So I'm Haitza, and I'm in Connecticut, the US, and I just love developing amazing interactive courses for professionals, schools, governments, and I'm super excited to be here.
Great. So once you present it, call out the next one, then we'll get down the list.
Let's have Peter de Vries. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Okay, my name is Peter de Vries and I'm from the Netherlands. I used to work at the Delft University of Technology and was involved in the last 6 years developing MOOCs and looking at it from research perspective to see how it's being used, how you could improve it, what is needed for teachers to know, not to know, and things like that. So that's what I've been looking in. And what I'm doing right now is research in looking into what's happening at the moment with all these beautiful technologies and the promises of the technologies as well. Like, for example, artificial intelligence. The question is, do you need to really know what people think? And do you need to prepare perfectly so you can, zoom in their expectations? I think we need to spend some time thinking about the other side of the technology, not just about using the technology to have a classroom or help somebody out, but also look at how will the future look like in 2 years from now if everybody is using the same kind of technologies. And just to give an example, Google loves to have us and will earn money while using the data of our students. Do we want this? Do we have another look on education, or do we just let it go? Thank you.
I think we're all in the same inquiry. For the sake of time, do you guys want to start to do the little assignment that we have? I think we want to define 1 or 2 objectives for the module, how to have difficult conversation.
Yes, to me, the first thing to figure out is what do you mean by difficult conversation? Does it has to do with somebody's position or whatever? So I think that's one of the first things you need to know. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I agree. Clarify.
And then what do you want to achieve? I mean, these are pretty logical things as far as I know. And I think you need to know a little bit more about the person you talk to. Is this a person, you know, has had a bad time lately, or, you know, whatever. There might be personal elements in, you know, in a story that are very important to know. And if it's a difficult situation, then you need to be aware of the fact that if the person is not fired, what will this conversation bring to the person? Are there alternatives? Are there something like that?
So by the end of this module, you should be able to clarify what is difficult.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because it might be difficult for you as an interviewer, but it might not be difficult for the other person. So you have to have some sort of clarification about the situation. And you need to know the person, or, you know, the background information a little bit. And then what's the message, of course. And is there an alternative in the message? Is there a, you know, hope? Is it all negative, or might there also be something positive?
Okay. That makes sense. Well, where do you think Ina and Lizette, what kind of content should we include? I don't know if I said your name right. Ina or I?
Yes. Yeah. It's like, you know, I know, right?
Oh, okay, cool. That's easy.
Easy.
Maybe I can take maybe an advanced learning module. At the end of the module, the participant is able to define the goal of...
I'm sorry, could you speak louder? I cannot hear you well.
Yeah, I do think I have problems with my audio. It's about defining learning objectives here. So at the end of the training, the trainee is able to define the goal of the difficult conversation. I do think it's an important one. The person has to be able to really specify the direction in which he wants to take the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's shared with others, so I just...
yeah.
So
I would agree.
All right. So I do think there needs to be content about communication strategies. So how to create what kind of path does a good conversation, and I mean a good structured conversation, consist. And I do think for different themes, subjects, the trainees have to, I don't know, create a scenario for themselves in which they hope the conversation can go. I don't know. I just put an idea there. Are there any
right.
other thoughts?
Yeah, I just put there's a book called Difficult Conversations. And this is the structure of the book. It's not to say that, you know, the module had to follow a book, but there is this book
there you go. Resources.
And you're satisfied about the book?
I'm sorry?
Did you use the book? Was it
I know that some of my
useful?
colleagues are using this specific book, but actually
Oh.
I haven't used it myself, in all
Oh, okay.
honesty. I haven't used this specific book for teaching. So it wasn't a recommendation. I was just more, but yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think, if it's a module, there probably needs to be a couple of different types of situations, maybe. And also maybe some practice. So I know, for example, in the virtual platforms, you can, maybe practice with some of these sort of structures and then post like a video, for example, submission, and then create a discussion around those video submissions. So this, it would be one option. So have it maybe, and you could even.
I can share.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know.
No, please go ahead.
Sorry, I can share in terms of interactions a structure that I've used in the past, whereby we actually recorded some people's reactions. So how to have a difficult conversation. So it starts with, how do you start a difficult conversation is chapter 1. And then there is a structure and a process flow. And then in terms of interaction, we basically did sort of a one-on-one and said, okay, you're trying to tell this person that, for example, they always arrive, they arrive 3 days out of 5, they arrive late at work, and it starts to piss people off. And how do you address this? So basically, you open, and then we've actually videoed a possible response. And then it's basically, okay, show the video. And then, okay, how do you respond to this? So then this person has to, respond to that. Then the faculty member presses another button, then another video starts to run. So the faculty member actually has a choice of 2 or 3 videos. So every time a person in class has a reaction, the faculty member can choose 1 or 3 responses that have been videotaped. So if you do it multiple times, the class tends to, make a different flow. And therefore you can then test the responses. So that keeps it interesting. The other way, of course, is one-on-one. And finally, then a faculty member shows a professional how to have a difficult conversation, and then class can see the differences. So interactions are either with a movie. So if it's online, the movie situation works really well because everybody for themselves can, we tell everybody practice to your computer essentially, and then the faculty member just runs another response and then practice to your computer. So it's depending on the virtual side. We use this pre-recorded movie as a way to practice having difficult conversations. The virtual way of sort of doing it, one participant with another participant gets to be very difficult for some reason. People find it easier to talk to a camera that nobody's listening to a classroom where 30 people virtually behind a computer are watching them, especially if it's being recorded. We didn't find that worked very well. Sorry, it was a very long answer to what's supposed to be a
Yeah, it depends on kind of like what I was thinking about was maybe with the video submissions, those would be then that would be an asynchronous, discussion around those little videos that they have done. So that was kind of like, it's a one way. It depends on, I guess, like the scale and scope and how you want to do it. If you want to do it like online, synchronously, the training, maybe those video clips are actually a really nice way, but you could do it also like asynchronously and ask, give some materials and ask students to produce some videos and then have a discussion around those.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we like that idea where participants create their own discussion or their own conversation. So we give them, option A, option B, and how would you have addressed this? And so then, the outcome. If you had done it this way, then the respondent would have had this response. If you'd done this way, now this is the response. So if you had taken response A, then you'd get counter response A. And so people can actually see, okay, if this is the way you've done it, now this is what's happening. And so would you now change your mind or continue? So what participants actually get to do is they get to build their own conversation, even though you're taking class run down the same path type thing. And we found that keeps engagement, basically.
It's fascinating that, so you can actually do role play asynchronously or synchronously. So
Right. People found it interesting to, as they say, write their own story.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and I like that part because it makes it relevant and meaningful. So they get to choose what difficult conversation they're having.
It is quite heavy on the preparation though. So it's not something you'd want to put together overnight.
All right, we have interaction, we have materials, we have 2 books, we have case studies. I think we're good. For a 20-minute design session.
I think my clock's ticking down, 2 minutes 30 or something we still have left. So
okay.
Some,
technologies, we're using video. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah. There's one thing I would like to connect to, and that's the transfer. Because if you go to a course, and how do you apply it in practice? So I think, if you're able to talk about your own situation, that's something you will remember and can easily apply. But if you have to more or less digest something you do not really know and then have to translate it to your own situation, you learn actually less than what you could if you, take your own situation as the point of departure.
Have you guys got experience that with virtual classrooms, for example, saying, okay, can the class give me an example of the difficult conversation they've recently had, and we can use that as the topic and then see how that goes? Or do you prepare a scenario for a difficult conversation and then ask the class to interact with that?
Both. Because I think you prepare one to kind of train and get them aware of the concepts. And then on another level of development, okay, now that you know the basics, how would you apply it to your own?
So I'm based in Asia, where there's a general reluctance to speak up and be front and foremost. So when we say, can you share a difficult conversation, you get zero response because nobody wants to admit that they were ever in a difficult conversation.
I agree. I worked in Japan for 10 years. I agree. Yeah, you gotta
okay.
set it up, make it safe, comfortable.
What I've done, but not in, but more, at a consultancy level, is ask the students to come in with, short videos they found on the internet, and they qualify this as good conversation or bad conversation or whatever, and then they argue why they think it is good and bad. That's also helpful and interactive, and people might not agree, but that's fine because it's not, directly related to their position. So there are lots of variations possible, but that's
I think we're back.
We are back here, actually. Yeah.
All right.
Really?
It looks like we have people coming, right? All right.
Yeah, Katie. Yeah, floor is yours.
Welcome back, everybody. How was that? What was that like? If you want to just pop into the chat, being in a breakout. I don't know if it was the first time some of you have been in a breakout, or kind of what are your general feelings about being in a breakout?
I was alone in a breakout.
Oh no!
But that's after 2 minutes.
I had that same experience, so I left my room and I came to the main room.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And it's funny. This happens, doesn't it? We were talking. It happens for me too. And we've started doing a campaign around what is this? What is virtual learning? This is not something that's just, you can just pop. It's actually, you're going to participate and you're leaving your team members. Look what happened to you, Peter. You're leaving your team members alone if you drop out of the session. So we do talk a lot about commitment, but it's a mindset shift, right?
Yeah. It's also interesting, Peter and others, in terms of how we are organizing it today, right? So obviously, a number of participants were dialing in, and they said, I like to hear, I like to have a level of interaction. But, not ready to be in a breakout session and participate, right? So, and as a consequence, you know, the breakouts have been set up based on 80 participants. And then what happened actually, a number check out, and as a consequence, you end up by yourself in a breakout room. So,
so like I said, I landed in a wonderful group. So
awesome.
I think a whole bunch of us were alone, so we all came back and were like, well, we're alone, but now we're together. So we got
pretty
through
good
the
at problem
assignment.
solving, right? We're figuring things out, problem solving. So that's great. Well, I'm glad it ended up that you had a
it worked out.
conversation. Yeah. So it says great interaction. We had 2 people, expected more. Yep. Great to have small breakout rooms, easier to share. Is there a way to have a collaborative workspace in a breakout? So one of the things that we do, and I don't know, we'd have to figure it out with the breakouts. I don't know what Zoom allows. We've had some challenges ourselves, like using a whiteboard in a breakout and then bringing it back to plenary. I don't know that works very well. But we use another tool called Miro, and it's a virtual whiteboard. And so you can set up Miro boards and use those as, they're really cool because it has sticky notes and you can brainstorm, you can design them for a particular session. So we've done that. You toggle out of Zoom and you go into, it's M-I-R-O, Miro.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, screen sharing. Yeah, that's true. You could do that, but again, we've had challenges. It could just be us learning all the things with Zoom. But we tried doing a whiteboard in a breakout session and then kind of showing it in the plenary, and it just didn't work for us. But that's Miro's one solution.
Thank you.
Awesome. So let me type it in here. M-I-R-O. Miro. There we go. All right. Did anybody come up with some great ideas around a difficult conversation, something really creative or something, a design for a difficult conversation session that you want to share? Did anybody have any interesting dialogue in the breakout that they want to share? Peter, I feel like I can see you. It looks like you want to say something.
We were led by Kaitsa. So she can summarize what we discussed.
And S. Welkers and many others. Yes, we had a very good conversation about this. Came up with 2 learning objectives, that it's important to clarify what is difficult, whether it's the context, the topic, the location, and then definitely to define the goals of the conversation or the intention. And one more, understanding the listener's perspective and role.
Awesome.
Were the main goals. And then we talked about scenarios and role playing and using technology to support that, being able to use videos where people can either create a video and post it and then someone else reacts to it and they could react from their own personal experience of what's difficult. So that's one case. And then there's another case where the faculty member could do a case study or present a difficult conversation and ask, how would you respond to this? And so students can, in the discussion, share a video of how they would respond.
Love it. Yeah.
And then we had 2 books as resources, but it was definitely, it came up that people needed to learn the concepts and strategies, but we also wanted to make it relevant and meaningful. And Peter shared an example of where people can find videos that are difficult and say why those conversations were difficult. Sorry, S. Welkers, I don't know what the S stands for, but he also mentioned some other ideas around how to, get people involved. So, particularly if you're reluctant, like if you're in an Asian culture where, you need to use different examples to get people comfortable.
No, that's great. I love the examples and non-examples and using video to show. I think that's really powerful, really powerful. It's great. Any other ideas from any of the other groups?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what she said about role playing, perhaps it's not long enough for real-time role playing, but one could do it role playing outside of the session and videotaping it, and then providing feedback when you get back to the session. We also talked about understanding the psychological background and barriers and cultural background and barriers of difficult conversations. Perhaps it's not so difficult for someone to talk about pay raise or promotion or performance assessment, but for others it is. So it's interesting to then find out more about various limitations. And then we also talked about having open-ended chats about what are the different difficult conversations people have had, and then having a poll of what are the most difficult conversations in general. And then you get a general idea of what are the most difficult conversations.
Yeah. Love it. So you had a mix of like polls and using videos. Those are great ideas. All really great ideas. Awesome.
Katie, I had a question
Sure.
for you.
Sure.
You said earlier that you bring, you have facilitators who are brilliant at a face-to-face program.
Yeah.
You bring them into a virtual session and it doesn't quite work. So what are maybe some of the top things that, if you're used to facilitation face-to-face, that you really need to think about before you try a virtual facilitation session?
Yeah, I think one thing is technology and kind of how to multitask, right? So like, how do you work the content? How do you work the participants? And how do you work the chat and kind of managing all of that? I think that's one piece where people struggle. I think it's the charisma and the storytelling, the authenticity, how you look, how you come across on a video screen is a little bit different than in the classroom, and you've got to get used to that. And it's just the design of the sessions, like explaining exercises and activities from the virtual perspective and using the technology to support that. So those are some of the things that we see. And we've started having our facilitators attend other sessions to learn the techniques and learn. And I'm still learning. I'm watching, every time, oh, what's that really cool thing that they're doing? Oh, they actually do call on people. They call right out to have people jump in. You just got to keep practicing with it. And I think that's some of the challenge.
Yeah, I just attended a fire session run by Luke the other week. So it was very good.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, Nick, let's just go to the next page. And I put together kind of just an example for you of what we did with difficult conversations. So kind of our outcomes were, learn a tool. So we like frameworks. So being a consulting firm, we like frameworks. So put together a framework of how do you work through a difficult conversation, kind of recognize and be able to use the key capabilities under it. And some of you talked about this. It's kind of a listening, empathy, understanding your own emotional reactions to things. And then at the end of the day, what we want them is when they leave the session is to have more confidence the next time they have to do a difficult conversation. And then you can see examples of the type of content, the interactions that we do. We have found a really cool technology. It's a vendor that helps us with this, and they actually have actors behind the scene, and we co-write scenarios together with them, and the actors come across as avatars on the screen with the participants. So they actually role play with an avatar in a real life scenario. And it's really powerful. People love it. It's very different from role playing with your colleagues, with your peers. It puts a little bit more pressure on you in the system, but it's another fun way to do this in a virtual environment. So that's kind of the big interaction we use. You can see the materials and the setup and the technologies. So that's another example. Nick, let's go to the next slide real quick so we have time to close it out. It's all about design, as Nick said, and we included a method. And guys, this isn't rocket science, right? This is, if you look at it, you can see Addie in there. It's just you have to think about all the different questions when you're dealing in a virtual environment. And in the article, we tried to give you a number of considerations and things to think about, and some examples and principles that can help you make those decisions. So thanks. I hope that was fun and you got some time to practice, and it's been great being here with you today. Back to Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Wonderful. No, I think it's a great exercise, and I enjoyed also my breakout room, having a conversation about virtual learning, but also, you know, how indeed a small module on this topic. So I want to ask you to, for yourself, if you reflect on the session today, any kind of, you know, takeaways, things you want to try if you design your next virtual classroom session. So let's use the chat and just write down actually for yourself what are the, you know, the things you wanna include in your programs moving forward based on today. The article, yeah, I will help you. The article that we are referring to can be downloaded from our webpage, the Center of Corporate Learning Innovation. So here's where you will find it actually, and then you can just go to publications, and then you know, you will find it. So yeah, anything? Yeah, the AI and the avatars from Katie. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Any other takeaways from the session today? Things you like to include actually in your design? You know, yeah. Role modeling, yeah. Everything. Thank you, Priscilla. Okay, so friends, for tomorrow we have a very exciting session as well with Bob Mosher, a long-term friend of the L&D community, and Bob will talk about designing for 5 moments of need, a topic that he's very passionate about. He has been talking about it for quite some time, and I thought, you know, bring him in would be exciting to learn from him tomorrow. So. Hopefully you can join again, and you can register through the Center for Corporate Learning Innovation again. Tomorrow it will be in the afternoon in the...
No, sorry Nick, it will be on Wednesday. Wednesday!
Oh, Wednesday. Oh, here you go, Wednesday. I'm thinking already it's Wednesday. Thanks, Christina, for jumping in. It will be Wednesday, actually, the session. So hopefully, so Wednesday. Hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday. And on behalf of Katie, of course, wonderful Katie, thank you for collaborating with me on this exciting article on the webinar today.
Great.
On other new exciting initiatives moving forward. Thank you, Christina, for helping to organize the session today for the center. Also, Gemma, thank you for the technology support, Miguel as well. So folks, I hope you had a great session today. Thank you for joining. We'll see you potentially on Wednesday again with Bob Mosher, and otherwise have a wonderful vacation, and we will be in touch. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.